Ready to level up your investing? Davelle Morrison talks about what truly pays off when you buy outside Toronto or even outside the country. This episode might just redirect your entire strategy and show you why the smartest opportunities are miles or even oceans away. For nearly a century, Bosley has been helping to shape the landscape of Canadian real estate. This podcast is an extension of that legacy, our way of staying connected to what matters most to you. Join us as we sit down with leading voices from across the industry and beyond to explore the ideas, trends, and stories that move real estate forward. Whether you're an agent, investor, homeowner, or just curious about the market, there's something here for you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Like a Boz, the podcast where we bring you real conversations with people shaping the real estate industry. I'm your host, Kristen Bosley, president and broker of record of Bosley Real Estate. Joining us today is Ms. Davelle Morrison. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's such a pleasure. You have the best voice for radio ever.
Thank you. Hopefully that doesn't mean I have like a face for radio.
No, you have a beautiful face that's perfect for television too, which of course you have been featured many times.
Thank you.
So I'm very privileged to have worked with you. You've been at Bosley for about 13 years now.
Yeah, about that.
And when you first started, we probably started around the same time. I distinctly recall working at Merton Street, wondering where you got your very strong work ethic from, how I could learn from you. So thank you.
It was just about put one foot in front of the other and just keep going.
Yeah.
And that's it, really.
And you still do it exceptionally well.
Thank you.
You have set yourself apart, of course, obviously with your media training. We see you in the media a lot. You at one time had your own radio show, and you do an exceptional job with client education and your training and seminar. So that's an amazing opportunity to learn as well. Thank you.
Thanks. I mean, I really enjoy doing that kind of stuff. It's a lot of fun. It's probably because prior to being an agent, I worked in media, in advertising and sponsorship sales. So I guess maybe because that's sort of my background, I sort of started doing that kind of stuff in my real estate business as well, too.
Yeah, and it transferred beautifully. Works very well for you.
Thank you.
So I think one of the reasons we have you here today is kind of your side hustle, which I also believe you've been doing for some time, which is investing.
Yes, absolutely. You know, it's funny. It's investing that actually brought me into becoming an agent. So I've been investing in real estate since 2008. And it was because I was doing that as my side hustle that, you know, at some point I knew I was going to get let go from my previous media job, that I was like, you know, I've been doing this real estate thing on the side. I should probably start pursuing this full time. And that's basically what led me to become an agent. It's one of the reasons why I have a lot of friends and family that work with me, because they know I have an expertise as a landlord, as a real estate investor, as someone who's bought real estate with friends. They usually come to me with their questions.
Yeah. And it's nice to find a realtor who actually is understanding holistically of all of those different facets and believes in it so much that you do it yourself.
Absolutely, for sure.
Right? And so not only do you invest in Toronto, you have expanded outside of Toronto and most recently outside of the country. So I'm really looking forward to getting into that.
Sure.
So tell me, what motivated you originally when you were investing to look beyond the city of Toronto for investment opportunities?
You know, I think the same thing that motivates some people to, you know, buy a house outside of the GTA. It's just being able to afford it. So luckily enough have a house in the city, and I did buy a duplex also in the city many, many years ago. And I've owned various condos in the city as well. But at some point when you want to expand your horizons and you're like, oh, Toronto's getting really expensive, you decide to look outside of the city. So for me, it was a matter of trying to figure out what is the best market outside of the city that seemed to make sense for me. So I started off with buying a couple of places in Prince Edward County. And I bought those with friends, because I always like to tell people who want to get involved in investing is that you don't always have all the money. And so sometimes when you don't have enough money, A, you go outside of the GTA, but B, you also decide to pool your money with friends and family to make it more affordable.
Okay, amazing. And so how did you choose Prince Edward County?
You know, I had done another side hustle. I did my yoga teacher training, actually, in Prince Edward County. Something
How
you
did
didn't
I
know
not
about
know
me.
this?
Yeah, so I did
Blew my mind.
Yeah, so I did my yoga teacher training there I can't even remember how long ago I did it, maybe 15 or 17 years ago.
Okay.
So I got in the habit of driving out to the county and got to know some people there and really enjoyed it. So went for a couple of weekends with friends. We really enjoyed it. We loved it. And it was, real estate here is really cheap. So first I helped one of my friends buy an investment property there. And so we drove out there I connected him with an agent who works out there. And we drove around, took a look at properties. I gave him some advice. One of my big things as an investor is I like to make sure that you have at least 2 units available for rent on the same property.
Okay.
Because if you have just one property on one site, all of your eggs are in one basket. So it's nice to be able to have something else as well on the same property. So my friend bought a place there, and then probably a year later, I was able to assemble a group of friends, and we were able to buy a place there.
Okay. And so fair to say that you chose a destination where you are happy to go and experience yourself.
Yes, absolutely. And that was one of the nice things about it. It was nice owning a place where I could invite a bunch of friends for the weekend. And luckily, it was a sixplex that I co-owned with a couple of friends. So it slept a lot of people.
Okay.
So when the season wound down in Prince Edward County, and Prince Edward County is like high season from about May until about the end of October even. So, I'd pick a weekend in November and bring all of my friends down. So I think they loved it too. And I certainly enjoyed being able to host, 20 friends. I mean, when can you put all of your friends in a mini motel basically,
Yeah.
where everybody gets their own room and suite? Like it was great. It was awesome.
It is awesome. Selfishly, I have stayed there because Davelle was kind enough to allow me an opportunity to be there. It's an amazing spot.
Thank you.
And I might dare add that you got in before Prince Edward County became Prince Edward County, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's funny because my friends and I, we just sold it this summer. But it was great to be there sort of at the height of everything, and especially the height of short-term rentals.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, once I do something, I want to get involved in something. So I ended up with a couple of people. We actually formed an association out there for owners of short-term rentals. So we got very involved with speaking to council, speaking to the mayor, making sure that the rules were going to go the way that the rest of the short-term rental investors needed them to go. So it was a great experience, and I got to know so many great people. And, the interesting thing about investing in a small town is you get greater access to people in that particular town. Access that you would never get in Toronto. I mean, literally in my phone, I can text the mayor of Prince Edward County. Like, that's insane. You wouldn't do that in Toronto. And
Right.
so the nice thing about investing in smaller markets is that you can get really involved with council and making sure that your investment's going to go in the direction you need it to go in.
Yeah. And I can imagine that's been a huge benefit for your business too.
Absolutely, for sure. It's
Lots
great.
of learnings.
Absolutely.
So if you were to take a look now outside of Toronto, which Ontario regions really do you feel offer the greatest investment opportunities at the moment?
Oh, geez, that's a tricky one. Well, I mean, anything outside of the GTA is cheap. Well, cheaper,
At this moment,
I should say.
for sure. Yeah, the external markets have taken a bit of a hit, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's nice to be by the water. A lot of people, there's something about water that really draws people in. So if I look at a place like Cobourg, one of the things that I like about that is that there's a Via Rail train that goes right there. Mm-hmm. It is on the water. There's other things to do. That's a market that looks really interesting to me. I love Niagara-on-the-Lake, but it is expensive. Mm-hmm. And quite frankly, even Prince Edward County has become expensive, but there's still some affordable things in Prince Edward County as well. So I think it's really about trying to find those smaller markets that maybe people haven't hit yet. And it's a place that is realistic for you to visit. I once checked out Sauble Beach because I'd gone with a bunch of friends. I love beach, right? So I want to be by the beach. I want to be by the water. And one of the things, I know lots of people love Muskoka, but I don't like the dark water. It's kind of scary to me. I like the blue water and the white sand. So Sandbanks in Prince Edward County, tiny Ontario also has the same thing. So actually, before I bought my place outside of the country, we actually investigated trying to buy something in tiny Ontario. Now, tiny, I think it's their short-term rules have become so egregious that would not be the place that I would invest in now. but I would pick a smaller town. Maybe it's a Sauble Beach. The challenge with Sauble Beach is it's like 3 hours outside of Toronto. So
Right.
it's really about trying to pick what's that smaller market that you can get into that isn't going to cost too much money. But then again, it's funny. Now I've come around on the other side going, how do I get back into Toronto again? How do I assemble a bunch of people to buy a place in Toronto? I have lots of different thoughts and ideas going in my head.
Well, there's opportunity in Toronto right now, which we haven't seen in a really long time.
Absolutely, for sure.
Okay. So, I mean, I'm curious to know how you go about assembling the right people to invest.
Well, I usually pick friends that I know and that I know well. So let's talk about my Prince Edward County place when we had that. I knew I had one friend who was really keen on buying something, and he was also handy. I had another girlfriend who was keen on buying something, and she was also another real estate agent. And then we needed to, as we went to look at the property, we're like, it's going to take a little bit more money. We need to find a fourth. And I had bought another property previously, and on my LinkedIn, one of my friends who I just hadn't seen in a while posted, hey, next time you're looking for investors, I might be interested. And I sort of remembered that. And so in this case, I went, hey, you know what? Remember you posted that? Are you still interested? And he said, sure. And he said, send me the numbers. Because it is always about the numbers,
Always,
right?
yeah.
Nobody's doing anything for the good of their health. So I sent him the numbers and he said, yeah, I'm in. And it was great because at the time he actually owned a contracting business. So in that, partnership that I had in Prince Edward County, there were 4 of us. So it was kind of like the guys did the contracting work and made sure that all this stuff worked. And then the girls handled, I guess I'm going to say the lighter stuff, making sure we had the right furniture. It was all staged, the Airbnb communication. So it was a great partnership because everybody did what their specialty is.
Well, and it sounds like everybody contributed.
Yes.
More importantly.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
And so when you look at the financial aspect of that, because co-ownership is becoming a bigger thing that we see often, was it an equal co-ownership or was there any sort of determination about what percentage anybody was investing?
You know what? Everybody invested what they could, and so your percentage was determined by what you could invest.
And did you work with a very specific lawyer to outline that kind of documentation?
We
And
did.
How do you save a friendship in that?
Well, I mean, you want to invest with reasonable people, right?
Yeah.
And so you get everything down on paper in terms of the partnership, in terms of what's going to happen if somebody leaves, if somebody needs to be bought out. One of the things I've started adding to some of those agreements is if one of my partners dies, there's like an automatic, we're buying you out. Because in my world, and I'm sure that probably works for a lot of investors, I'm in business with you. I'm not in business with your heirs. And it might sound cold or crass, but I don't want to be in business with your heirs because I don't know them.
Yeah.
And so
it's often complicated.
Yeah, exactly, right? So the idea is that there is a clause written that if you die, you're automatically being bought out simply because we're not dealing with your heirs. But then I had a situation in the property that I bought outside of the country where one of my partners was dating somebody who was horrible. And so
this is going on the internet, right?
That's why I'm not naming names. Anyways, needless to say, so we crafted a clause that essentially said, that if there was a spouse who was making claim on this asset, they were also to be bought out.
Okay.
Because this is about protecting that partnership.
Right.
Right? You're investing with the people you want to invest it with and nobody else.
Okay.
So that's how I've sort of refined some of those partnership agreements to make certain that, okay, if we're going to do this, we're doing this with each other and nobody else.
Right. And did you have a particular co-ownership lawyer that helped you through that, or just a regular real estate lawyer?
Yeah, just a regular real estate lawyer.
Okay.
I'd taken one agreement. I can't even remember which lawyer had given it to me. And then I've kind of been able to use that and tweak that in all of the other property purchases that I've done.
Okay. Well, I mean, thank goodness you knew enough to do that, right? I think a lot of people get into co-ownership without any sort of agreement. It's a bit of a disaster.
Absolutely. But, one of the challenges that I've had sometimes in that, we buy the place, we know that we're going to sign the agreement, we look at the agreement, and then the agreement doesn't get signed. Or the agreement gets signed like 4 years later. So I've also had that case happen as well too, that sometimes for some reason you just can't get it going.
Right.
Because it's a big agreement and there's lots to look at and you've got all partners with all lawyers looking at it. Like this is not the kind of thing where you just get one lawyer to look at. Each party has to have their own lawyer review it.
Yeah.
So it takes time because I find sometimes dealing with lawyers, and I know this is on the internet, they like to sort of justify and put their own stamp on things and
Yes.
their own wording on things to justify their existence. And so, yeah, it can be a problem sometimes.
I just want to note that it was Davelle that said that and not me, but I do agree. So I think you're intimately aware and well positioned to really talk about the difference between, a regular consumer purchasing a resale and a group of individuals or a single individual looking to buy an investment property. So what are the differences in due diligence and financing that you have to really consider when you're going the investment stream?
Well, I mean, can you afford it? Of course, that's the one thing. But the main thing is cash flow.
Right.
I remember probably about, I want to say 15, maybe about 15 or so years, I had gone to one of those pre-construction condo openings. And there was a big agent / investor there. And I don't want to use his name, but he's kind of a big deal. And this was before I was an agent.
Is he really a big deal though, or does he think he's kind of a big deal?
No, he's a big deal.
Okay. Just clarifying.
No, he's legitimately a big deal.
Okay.
And I was, young and I wasn't even an agent yet. And he was trying to sell me on the idea of, yeah, you can buy this pre-construction condo and it doesn't cash flow positive and that's okay.
Which we see so often in Toronto, right?
Yes, absolutely. And, when I say cash flow positive, I should define what that is. Because when I say that, some people are like, what does that mean exactly? So that just means that after your mortgage costs, your maintenance fees, and your property taxes, the rent covers all of those things.
Okay.
So if the rent doesn't cover all of your expenses, then you're cash flow negative. Now, for a while, there was a ton of investors doing that, especially in the Toronto condo market. For a lot of those people, perhaps they're making a ton of money that they need a write-off on their income. So maybe that's why they did it. For some people, they're buying condos for their kids. And so they did it because they were thinking that their child was going to be using it later. Or, especially in the Toronto condo market before, I'm going to say before the last 2 years, they were just banking on the fact that this condo would appreciate so much that they thought it's fine. But that ship has sailed, and that's just no longer the way people are operating, right? In the last couple of years, a lot of my condo investor clients have sold off their condos because they were not cash flow positive. And in this market, they just knew that they weren't going to be able to get that kind of return. So for me, I've always been a big believer of I want my property to cash flow positive.
Yes.
That's something
Otherwise, what's the point?
Right, exactly. And so, I have a duplex in Riverdale that I own. And luckily with that place, because I bought it such a long time ago and there's 2 units in there, it cash flows positive. And so the investment really does work. And so now when I'm working with investors, and the investors these days are really few and far between, I say to them, well, instead of buying the condo, could you buy a house that can be turned into 2 or 3 units? Because I feel like that's where you're going to get the more bang for your buck, because that way you have a greater chance of it being able to cash flow positive.
Okay. And so when you're buying outside of the city, outside of the GTA, we've talked about how you're a licensed realtor. Do you represent yourself outside of the GTA, or do you have local representation?
I have a local agent.
And why is that?
Well, because I don't know everything about that market. I certainly know a lot about that market, like, so for example, Prince Edward County. But anytime I've done a transaction there, I've always used a local realtor.
Right.
Because I think it's important to use a local realtor who actually knows what's going on in that market. I also think that other local realtors get offended when a Toronto agent goes into an outlying market. And you're not going to get the same information that you would if you would just use somebody local to that market. There are things that Toronto agents don't know. I almost want to call it you don't know what you don't know. And you can't look it up fast enough, right? And of course, you sometimes run into local agents. So I did find that a little bit in Prince Edward County because I knew so much about the Airbnb rules. There were local agents that didn't know enough about that. So I think anytime you find an agent, it is about looking for an educated agent. So whether it's an agent in that local market or an agent who knows something about investing or an agent that knows something about short-term investment rules. So whatever it is that you're looking to do, you need to find an agent who is qualified to give you advice on the thing you want to do. So, I mean, I have clients now who are in Toronto looking for a house with a basement apartment. And I say to them, listen, I've had a basement apartment in my house since 2008. So I can give you lots of tips. I know what to do. I can give you lots of really great advice because my experience, I'm living and breathing it. I'm not just going, hey, you should do this.
And I think that's critical, right? There are so many people who think that they have the skill set to go and invest in markets that they're unfamiliar with that don't have that knowledge. And then they think that maybe they're meeting somebody local that does, only to discover that maybe they're not as knowledgeable in that very specific niche that you're looking for, right? So I think doing your research is certainly the most critical.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, amazing. So when you invested outside of the GTA, were there any kind of big surprises or misconceptions you had about investing in smaller markets or emerging Ontario markets?
I mean, it was a small town. And I guess even though I grew up in the suburbs of Toronto, I guess I consider myself to be a city girl or a city woman. And so, yeah, it was just interesting to see how things operate in a small town. But on the same note, I was able to get to know people really quickly and really well. Like, I had a bunch of my neighbors on text that I could text anytime I needed something, especially if I were in Toronto. I could ask them a question, hey, what's going on at my house? So I did find things like that really easy. We found really good property managers. We've got, people who gave us recommendations. And once you get connected with a really good property manager, that's really going to help solve all of your problems because you can't be everything when the property is 2 hours away from where you live.
Right. So is that something you would recommend if you are investing outside of the area where you live?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Okay.
It's important. I mean, I think the same way that you're going to have that local agent, you're going to have that local property manager who's also going to be able to help you. They're going to have trades that can help you, or they're handy themselves so they can do things for you to the property. So we'd always been lucky with getting really good property managers who were also super handy. So they could fix things or they knew who to call to fix something else. So that is absolutely key.
Okay. This next question, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I am so envious. You recently invested in Barbados.
I did.
Yes?
I did.
I would like to go there. So needless to say, I think it's an incredibly different landscape than what we're accustomed to here. What initially drew you to consider that investment opportunity, other than the beach and the blue water?
Well, it's funny. So my hairstylist is Bayesian.
Okay.
That's what they call people from Barbados.
Yes.
And he talked to me so much about Barbados. I was like, yeah, I really want to go. I'd never been to this place. I want to go check it out. So my girlfriends and I went New Year's 2020, so before the pandemic. So we go down to Barbados, and while we're there, we, meet with a real estate agent who shows us through a couple of properties, which is interesting. And then even one of my colleagues here from Bosley happened to be down there around the same time I was there. So we went out with this agent and saw some properties and just kind of got a feel for the market. And then, of course, COVID happened. And then I sort of changed my mind about wanting to invest in outside of the country. And then probably about a year later, one of the guys who was going to be investing with me said, you know what, we should put that back on the radar. And so I was like, yeah, that's a good idea. So I reached out to one of the agents who'd helped us back then. Actually, and what's interesting is that the agent who was helping us in 2020 before the pandemic was Canadian. But during the pandemic, she decided to leave and come back to Canada.
Okay.
So there was a listing agent who was listing one of the properties we went to see. So I'd actually reached out to her. She was local to Barbados. So I reached out to her. It was probably either December or January 2021. We were still pretty much in lockdown here. And Barbados was going through very different phases of lockdown. So we spoke to her, told her about the kind of property that we were looking at. She said she had a bunch of clients that were looking. So she walked us through these properties via her phone on WhatsApp, on video. So, we'd all get into our phone and we'd look at the property and You're like, yeah, okay, that looks interesting. We offered on one place, but they didn't even sign it back. They just said, no, forget it. And the thing about Barbados is, luckily enough, because I'd been there before, I knew exactly the neighborhood I wanted to be invested in.
Okay.
And with Barbados, it's tricky. It's not like here. Here is so easy. We've got one, system. We can go online. We can look at all the properties for sale, and we get a great example of what's available in the market. In Barbados, they don't have one system. You just have to literally keep Googling and Googling and Googling. So I would literally spend hours on Google looking at all the various real estate websites to find properties for sale, which is crazy. But unfortunately, that's the way their market works.
They're not alone, by the way. We're
Yeah.
incredibly grateful for that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, they are not alone. So anyways, that's what we did. Anyways, saw some properties. I wanted this specific neighborhood. And it's funny because when my partners started to Google, they'd be like, what about this place? What about this place? I'm like, it's not in the right neighborhood. And I'm sure at this point they're probably getting frustrated with me. But I was the one who'd been there the most recent. So I really knew what I wanted. And also we all had a mutual friend who lived in the particular neighborhood that I wanted us to invest in. Because the houses outside of this neighborhood, some of them are a lot nicer, great prices, but they just weren't in this neighborhood. Anyways.
Location.
Absolutely.
It's the most important part of real estate.
Absolutely. So we're, on the west coast of Barbados in this little, I guess, enclave called Sunset Crest, if people know where that is. And so we found the right property. Again, agent walks around on her phone and we're like, yeah, this looks good. This looks like the property we want. And so now we're like, hey, because now we're in Canada and it's the pandemic, we're not flying there to take a look at it. But I'm like, can I get a home inspection done on this property? Well, again, when you invest outside of your country, you're not used to the way they do business. Well, they don't do that. So we actually defined a structural engineer who was willing to do an analysis of the property for us. And the structural a home inspection in Toronto might cost you $600. The structural engineer was like $900 US. But anyway, since we weren't
Worthwhile, I would expect.
We weren't physically there, so we were like, let's get this done. So we got that done, which was great. They took a look at the property. So we offered on the place in like February of 2021. Got the deal done. In fact, we put in a lowball offer. We just naturally assumed that we were going to go back and forth and do some negotiation, as one does. But they just accepted our offer. We were like, amazing. So, because we knew the property was great, but we knew it needed work.
Right.
And we were comfortable doing that work too. It wasn't major work, but it needed some work.
It was enough.
Yeah. So, we buy the property in February. We don't close on it until October. Now, the thing about Barbados is we're told you cannot close on a property sooner than 90 days.
Oh.
So we figured, you know what? Offer February, closing date October, that's fine. The one thing that's a little bit different about investing outside of Canada, I'm going to say, is that the closing date doesn't mean the same thing. And so now we buy the property in October, that's closing in October. It's supposed to close at the beginning of October. And that date comes and goes, and our lawyers don't reach out to us. And so now it's like the day after our closing date, and I'm reaching out to the lawyers going, yeah, so nobody's asked us for any money. Like, what's going on? And they were like, oh, we're still waiting for documents to be signed from England because Barbados is very British.
Right.
And so a lot of the people who own properties are located in England. Fine. But in my mind, I'm thinking, this property's closing in February. Why not send out the documents to be signed to England, like in September?
Right.
Why wait till the last minute? And the other thing about Barbados is they don't do electronic signatures the way that we do here in Toronto.
Well, it's island life.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's
so
very different.
Absolutely. So, those are some of the things that, there are hiccups sometimes with investing outside of the country because it doesn't operate the way that you do. The one thing that I would be very grateful for is that people there speak English.
Yeah.
Because I've had friends and other investors, they're investing in Dominican Republic right now, or they're buying in Mexico right now. And all I can think of in my mind is like, oh my God, you're having to read through legal documents in other languages. And English, we know English, but even us reading a legal document in English isn't like a cakewalk.
No.
It is still challenging. So if it's not your primary language, let's say you're trying to read, Spanish language legal documents. Like, oh my God.
So when you say you have friends investing all over the world,
Yeah.
are you referring them?
If they ask me, they don't necessarily always ask me.
Okay.
So sometimes if they ask me, yes. In fact, my friends and I are going to Saint Martin in January for a friend's birthday. So I was actually trying to get a referral for that because they do want to look at properties while we're there. So
Right.
we're trying to get that done.
Connect through Leading RE.
They don't have anybody there. I've already
In
asked.
Saint Martin?
Yeah.
Oh, well, we're going to fix that.
Yeah, I've already checked.
Okay. Well, so, I mean, what an interesting experience, right? So you have Toronto investing, you have surrounding Toronto investing, you have kind of rural area, and now you've got abroad. So huge wealth of experience. Is there anything that you feel you really had to learn the hard way?
Oh, the challenging thing with investing in Barbados has been finding the right accountant and finding the right property managers and finding the right lawyers.
Okay.
And so that's been the hardest thing for sure, because I am not an accountant. I am not a lawyer. And so I want to hire those things out to get expertise that I don't know. But the biggest challenge I've had is I found you have to look at what the lawyer and the accountant are doing and perhaps sometimes retool, get rid of your lawyer, hire new lawyers. And
I
so
see.
that's probably been the hardest thing is the professionals.
Finding some trusted
Yeah.
experience.
Absolutely.
Why, for my curiosity, would you need an accountant locally?
Well, because it's an Airbnb that we're running.
Okay.
So it is a business. We've got expenses. We've got to file taxes in that country. So, we've got an accountant / bookkeeper to monitor all that stuff and file taxes in Barbados. So
Okay.
that's the challenge. And then
File taxes. There you go.
yeah,
Thank you.
But even here in Canada, so my accountant actually has to oversee what my accountant in Barbados does, because the CRA has requirements in terms of a specific document that you need to fill out to say that you own a property outside of the country. So I think the biggest challenge sometimes has just been everything going on in my mind
Right.
of those little things that can kind of trip you up, that you really need to make sure you have the right professionals who can help you. And so that's even making sure that your accountant in Toronto is good and well-versed in this.
Yeah, you're also one of the most organized people I know. So for you to be distracted by some of those small things speaks volumes, right? So it is a
Yeah.
very large challenge to kind of overcome before you make that commitment.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
Okay, amazing. And so I don't think it's a secret that you help many people invest in real estate, as it is one of your niches. When you see investors buying outside of major cities, what is one of the largest mistakes that people typically make?
I think that they think that they can do it themselves. I've seen some people try to just buy direct. Oh, yeah, I found a homeowner. I'm just going to, call them up and save the commission. And so that's something I've seen people do. And it kind of goes back to, you don't know what you don't know. People think that they can Google everything, right? Or they can chat GPT their way out of everything. But unfortunately, you can't.
ChatGPT is always wrong. Just saying. It's
Well, I use it a lot.
I use it a lot too, but I don't know that you can trust it for things like, your short-term rental regulations in each area, right?
Absolutely. So I think that people don't think they need other people. They think that they can do it on their own.
Right.
And I think that that's a big challenge. But quite frankly, I even see that in Toronto, where I'll have people say, oh, I could just go to the open house and work with the listing agent. And then I try to explain to them, but that listing agent represents the seller. They don't represent you. And, the best way that I have to say to people how that truly works is, imagine walking into a court of law and expecting the prosecuting attorney to defend you.
Yeah.
You wouldn't do it. But with real estate, people think they can do it.
It's the perfect analogy.
Yeah, and whether they're in Toronto or outside of Toronto, they think, oh, I'll just walk into the open house and use the listing agent. And I'm like, no, you need your own agent who's got your back.
I would agree. I see that all the time.
Yeah.
Okay. So, we've talked a little bit about rentals. What is one thing that you must understand locally about the culture or the agents or the regulations before you really choose to dive in and invest there?
You need to understand the kind of rentals, the people who are going to be renting in your place. Because Toronto is a market where you've got a lot of professionals, you've got a lot of white collar workers. When you go outside of the GTA, the people who rent in those places are a little bit different. And so I think that's one of the things that people actually really have to understand about markets outside of the city and knowing who are the kinds of people that rent. Now, there's some people that, buy places in, let's say, Waterloo or Kitchener. It's close to schools, so they know that they're going to get students, and that's great. But I think that especially the landlord-tenant board rules, knowing what they're like, you need to make sure that you're going to get good quality tenants. So you need to make sure that wherever you're investing outside of the GTA, you can get good quality tenants, because I think that's the thing that can trip people up.
Okay, I'm going to throw in a really random question that you're probably not prepared for, but given how much research I know you do in your day, I expect you might have a good answer for this.
Okay.
According to the landlord and tenant rules, Ontario just passed Bill 60.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on how that's going to impact some of your investors or tenants?
I think it's really interesting with Bill 60 because I'm, watching the footage on TV and I'm seeing like how people are getting in the legislature, and they are like,
there's a
up in
lot of
arms
chaos
over this thing. And when I look at the rules, so basically what it says is that, a landlord has to wait instead, but they had to wait after 15 days before a tenant didn't pay rent to file eviction notices. And the new rule says they can wait after 7 days. The difference between 15 and 7 days isn't really that much. And so I kind of go, I don't understand why these people are spinning out of control about this.
It seems to me that people are spinning out of control because landlords, in my opinion, are getting a bit more of a fairer shake than they have historically, with things like their ability to evict to move in with a certain time period and no longer have to pay or negotiate with that tenant. There are some, small but meaningful changes in that bill that to me signify more fairness to both sides rather than a very tenant-oriented
Absolutely.
bill.
And I think there's still more to go with reopening that Residential Tenancies Act to make it a little bit more fair and balanced. Of course, I know lots of tenants would disagree with me. But, one of the other things that's in there that I thought was interesting is that it means that if a tenant is going to the landlord-tenant board rule because, not rule, but if they're going to the landlord-tenant board because they haven't paid rent, number one, they have to make sure that 50% of their rent is actually paid before they create, I guess, sort of another file. But it also says they can't bring up anything new at that particular session, which I think is really interesting because, last year, my colleague and I sold a house, and that house had a tenant in the basement, and our clients lived upstairs. And unfortunately, what happened is that basement tenant refused to leave. And so we actually had to sign a mutual release to let the buyers who bought the house out of the deal.
I mean, tenants are one of the largest reasons deals fall apart, right?
Exactly. And so, it's taken a year for that tenant to leave. And every single time our clients went to the landlord-tenant board, she'd start to bring up new things. And so when I listened to this Bill 60, the fact that tenants cannot bring up new things, I'm like, yeah, exactly. That's the way it should be. People need to understand that for a landlord, they are literally spending the money, paying the mortgage, paying the property taxes on a property. And if a tenant doesn't pay their rent, the bank doesn't forgive that. The bank still expects that mortgage to be paid. So I think that, people need to kind of understand what's truly going on with landlords. They're not the boogeyman. I am also a landlord. I try to be reasonable with my tenants. But people have to be reasonable. And I think that the challenge is people don't want to be reasonable, and they only want to see their side. They don't want to put themselves in somebody else's shoes.
Right. And so given some of the changes that will be meaningful, do you think that we will see more people move towards investment? Because I think that the thought of being a landlord sometimes will hold people back from that investment opportunity.
I don't think the rules are enough to make somebody say, hey, I wasn't thinking about it before, but I'm going to dive in right now. To me, I think the rule changes are very minor, which is why I don't even understand why people are such up in arms about it. And in fact, they're so minor, I don't think that they're making any people change their minds to say, hey, I want to be a landlord now.
Right.
So, I mean, I think that they still have a ways to go in making those rules more equitable so that more landlords want to get in the business. But I think right now a lot of people are just sitting on the sidelines.
I agree. I also think that overall people like chaos.
Right.
So, it'll settle down.
Yeah, it will settle down. But right now, like I said, when I watched on the news about, people being tossed out of the legislature and,
It's so dramatic.
yes,
Everything's so dramatic.
it was like they were having
Just relax.
Yeah, they were having like temper tantrums, like they were a child. But the reality is that if you're a tenant that pays your rent on time, none of what got passed is ever going to affect you.
Right.
Except for the fact where it says, the landlord doesn't have to pay the tenant after 120 days. Now, that rule to me is also a bit weird because currently right now, you'd have to give your tenant 60 days notice to vacate if you want to use the property for yourself or for your kid's self and pay them 30 days, pay them rent. The new rule is basically saying if you give them 4 months notice, you don't have to pay them anything. So that to me is a bit of a weird one because I'm like, wait a second. Before the rule was essentially you were giving them 3 months notice. So now you're saying 4 months notice and you don't have to pay them anything. So that one's a little bit weird to me. But all the other rules, I'm like, it's not much of a change.
Well, and I think that that's probably what people are up in arms about because a lot of tenants will hold landlords hostage for
Yes.
that. Right. So
Yes.
to me, I think that's one of the most positive changes.
Absolutely, for sure.
So just circling back to investing, because obviously that's why we're here today.
Yep.
Okay. So if you were somebody looking to invest outside of Toronto with your experience, what is your kind of one piece of honest advice for them?
It's all about the numbers.
Okay.
So you've got to make sure you look at the property, figure out if when you're putting when you put your 20% down payment down, because that's what you have to pay for a property that you're turning into a real estate investment. You need to do the math and make sure that, with your 20% down payment, those mortgage payments, the property taxes, and any kind of upkeep or maintenance that you think you might need when you're paying your property manager, what kind of rent can you get to cover those expenses?
And so are you putting aside a certain percentage for that property management or property
No, it's just
upkeep?
I'm looking at the cost of how much that property manager is going to charge, but
Okay.
no, I'm not setting aside a specific amount for that. I guess I probably should. And, if you're doing it sort of the textbook way to do it would also be to, assume some sort of vacancy rate in there.
Right.
That's the textbook way to do it.
Okay.
But, in Ontario, in Toronto for the longest time, you haven't had to assume a vacancy rate because nothing's ever vacant. That being said, times have changed. And so now,
I was going to say, I did distinctly recall a couple of weeks ago in the sales meeting, you were like, for the first time ever, one of my condos is vacant.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So now all of a sudden it's like, oh, the vacancy thing is a real thing. Because yes, I was looking for a new tenant this summer and I did have 1 month vacant. And I'm like, this never happens. So yes, the textbook way of doing it is to assume a vacancy rate. So yes, we should probably go back to that textbook for a reason.
Okay. So you have mortgages, you have tax, you have maintenance, you have property management, you have vacancy
And insurance.
and insurance. Okay.
Always have insurance because you need to have the property covered.
Okay.
So once you go through that, then you look at, okay, how much money is covered by rent? And that's where, having a property, and perhaps let's say you're going to buy a house in a market outside of the GTA.
With more than one unit?
Yes, exactly. That's what I was
Okay.
about to say is see if you can get a basement apartment in there.
Okay.
So that way now you've got 2 units to cover the rent. Now, one of the reasons why I do that is the idea is that I don't want all my eggs in one basket. If one tenant doesn't pay me rent, I want to make sure there's another tenant who can possibly pay me rent. And I know at least with 2 tenants paying me rent, the chances are pretty high I'm going to cash flow positive and everything is going to go smoothly. So that's the gold standard, I should say.
Okay. I feel like I've learned so much.
Cool. Awesome.
Also, I had no idea you had your yoga teacher's training. I'm still stuck back there.
Oh, yeah. I meditate every morning.
I did know that. We share that in common. So listen, I think that we have done an exceptional job educating our consumer about how to invest, both within the GTA, outside, and abroad. Just so you know, if you are somebody looking to invest anywhere, please don't forget to call us or Davelle or anybody else because we often refer to leading real estate companies of the world, which is our global network. And the resources there, to Davelle's point about understanding the ins and outs of the local culture and regulations are plentiful to get everybody started on the research that needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of, just me reminding you that we're here to help. But before we go, this is the favorite part of the conversation for me.
Okay.
I get to kind of rapid fire some questions at you. I personally am very excited about this with you as a guest because I know you will actually have some great answers for all of these questions.
No pressure.
Well, we've had some guests on here who apparently don't read.
Oh.
So it's going to be really interesting to hear what you say.
Okay. All
And I don't mean that in a judgment way. I mean, we're all very busy. Some people listen to podcasts and some people listen to audiobooks, but I know that growth is a huge part of who you are. So
Yes.
I'm curious. We'll start with question 1. What is one lesson you've learned in your career that you wish you knew a lot earlier?
To be courageous.
Okay.
Yeah. I think to be courageous, that you can go for it and do it.
I told you. Her answers were going to be great. Okay. Be courageous. What brings you joy?
So many things. Travel, working out, dancing.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have dancing in common.
Yes, absolutely.
Are you still going to those Sunday afternoon dance parties?
No, because it's cold now. They haven't
The fair weather
happened.
dancer.
Yeah, exactly. They haven't happened now. So now I'm like, well, maybe next summer.
Yes. I'm going to join you.
Okay, sounds good.
You know what my favorite part about that answer was? You have balance in your life.
Right.
So congratulations. That's
Thank
very
you.
difficult to find in realtors.
I try. It's very hard, but I try.
Yes. It's amazing how many times I ask people what brings them joy, and then they revert back to an answer that has to do with work.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
It's really fascinating to watch. Okay. What book is on your current reading list?
Well, I've just literally gone through Jacinta Ardern. She was the Prime Minister of New Zealand.
Oh.
Yeah, really interesting book. Plus, I've just listened to 107 Days, the Kamala Harris book, where she literally takes you through every single day of the campaign. So it's really interesting because it's not just a background of Kamala. It is a bird's eye view of like what every single day was bringing in the campaign. So also super interesting. And then I'm reading this book by Dr. Stacy Sims, and it's about working out, menopause, when to eat food, when to eat at certain times, what workouts to do. Also very fascinating.
Health and wellness.
Yes.
Yeah. Big believer in that. We share this.
Yes.
Okay. My last and favorite question. If you were to do a TED Talk for us, what would the topic be?
I guess it would be about real estate investing.
Okay.
Really? I mean,
I think we just did it.
Yeah, exactly. We just talked about that. So I feel like it would be on real estate investing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I am supposed to wrap up the podcast now because I have admittedly diverted quite significantly.
Okay.
But I have one more question I can't help but ask. You just referenced whether you were going to be able to afford to invest in Toronto. And I think one of the things that we perhaps have not touched on is how you can afford to invest, period, if you're an average person working an average job and an income in our city.
Well, one of the things that I believe in is leverage. The challenge is that we've all grown up being taught debt is bad, debt is bad, debt is bad. And so when I bring this up, people are like, But the reality is that if you own a property in the city, if you already own a house, you have a ton of equity built into that home. Mm-hmm. And so it's using that equity that you've already built up to be able to buy your next place.
It is interesting how we're taught that debt is so bad. I certainly had the same tune growing up, except for real estate.
Right.
Leverage equity for real estate. Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
And that's one of the things, over the years, I've certainly read about a lot about real estate investing. And that's what you realize is that if you're going to be a real estate investor, you are going to leverage one property to buy the next. That's the whole no money down thing that we grew up with many, many years ago. It's not really no money down. You are just leveraging one property to buy the next. But that's how becoming a real estate investor is done.
Thank you so much for coming today, Davelle. I've really learned a great amount about investing.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, your insights are invaluable, and I can't wait till next time. So to everybody listening, thank you so much for your time, and it's like a boss. Bye for now. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who might find it valuable. We've got more conversations coming your way with incredible guests across design, finance, wellness, tech, and more, all through the lens of real estate. A special thank you to our set design sponsors, Stage Right.